Through peace, blessings can be contained, blessings can be held, blessings can be received. And therefore, it's worth sacrificing for peace, because sometimes we do need to sacrifice for peace. We have to put our own opinions, our own desires on the side to give space for others. And that's sometimes really hard for us, but it's worth sacrificing for. In the days of counting and ascending and working on ourselves and getting closer to God, refining our character, as the Jews did 3,335 years ago. And every year there's the same energy of personal refinement as a tool of being able to receive one more time from a deeper level than ever before God's Torah. And especially, of course, as the vehicle that was the energy that allowed the Torah to be given was unity. When the Jews reached the foot of Mount Sinai, which was actually today, on the first day of the Jewish month of Sivan, which is today, were united. They were absolutely united. And that unity was the vehicle for God to say, yes, you're ready. I can give you my Torah. You can receive it. So we were really discussing last week, and we'll continue today, various tips for ourselves, how we can enhance our own inner peace and relationships with people on various levels. Last week, we touched on 3 ideas. We discussed the idea of this obstacle to peace, of a version of the word ego, this idea of you take up my space. I don't like you because you lessen my space, which could be sometimes our feelings for others, and sometimes could be others' feelings for us. We discussed that for quite a while. We discussed the idea of appreciation as something that really sweetens relationships, and really not taking for granted the good people do for us, even though they do it all the time, even though maybe we think we don't really need it, but really understanding that is a tremendous tool to help create peace in relationships. And the third idea we spoke about last week was appreciating the ideal. Recognizing that peace is the vehicle that contains blessings. Through peace, blessings can be contained, blessings can be held, blessings can be received. And therefore, it's worth sacrificing for peace, because sometimes we do need to sacrifice for peace. We have to put our own opinions, our own desires on the side to give space for others. And that's sometimes really hard for us, but it's worth sacrificing for. So those were the 3 ideas we discussed last week. I want to focus on a few more this week in terms of practical tools, tips, strategies for bringing more peace into our relationship. I wanted to give you 2 ideas from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that I think are very practical and relatable. And really, if we try to integrate them, they can really help us shift in our relationship. So one famous vignette with the Lubavitcher Rebbe is that the Rebbe, for several years, once a week on Sundays, would stand for hours distributing dollars to every single person who came by. And this went on for hours. And this is a very exhausting thing, and it's taking up a lot of time. And once some elderly woman who had probably been waiting online for a few hours comes in front of the Rebbe, and she's like, how do you do it? How do you do this for hours every single week? And the Rebbe responded, you don't get tired when you're counting diamonds. And that is such a wonderful perspective for us to assimilate, for us to adopt. If the Rebbe was looking at the person in front of him and seeing a diamond, that person's special. That person's hugely important. That person has so much to offer the world. That person's shining. When you look at people that way, you're going to treat them differently. And that could start a whole ripple effect in changing the dynamics of the relationship. So I think that's, of course, you could say, well, that's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. But I think it's something we can try in our world, in our way, to adopt when we look at people and try to envision the person in front of you as what they are, another one of God's diamonds. Something else from the Rebbe that I thought also was a practical tidbit on creating peace. So someone once asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he heard that if Saturday night you fold your prayer shawl right away, that will help bring peace and harmony to the home. And he asked the Rebbe his opinion on this. And there was I don't know if how you fold your prayer shawl is going to bring peace and harmony to the home. But if you fold up your sleeves and you wash the dishes, that will probably bring harmony to the home. Now you could say, oh, that was a cute line, that was a quip, an aside. But I think that was telling us something very important about creating peace in relationships, serenity in relationships. If we want to enhance relationships, we have to think practically. We have to think about the other person and what they need, which sometimes is not necessarily what I would like to give, and then do it for them. When you think of the other person and you give them not what you want to give, but what they need, that shows that what you're thinking of is for them, not for you. Like, I'd say as a teacher, you would like to speak to a student and counsel them, and really what the student needs from you is to take that same time and to review the class so they could succeed better on the test. And it's a very simplistic example. It's a teacher-student model, but meaning we're not thinking, oh, I'm going to review the information. I mean, that was class was for. I want to give them, I want to hear their issues. I want to help them. I want to guide them. That's nice, but actually that's not what they really need from you. What they really need from you that would be very useful would be if you would help them prepare for class tomorrow. If you would help them study for their next exam. That's something not that you want to give, but that they need.
The relationships that I'm working on most is with my daughters and with my...
And it's similar in all relationships, that very often we think of what we want to give, and we have to sometimes stop and think, what does this other person need? Let me shift the focus from me, even me in a giving mode, to them in terms of what they need. So if people try this, how do people feel about these ideas?
Middle daughter, she always felt like I didn't pay a lot of attention to her, take a lot of interest in her. And so that's something that I'm trying to step up. I'm trying to check in with her more often, take an interest, ask, how was your week at work? How's this or that? It seems to make a difference. We've been having some nice conversations. So that's bringing peace between her and I.
It's wonderful.
More.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean, listen, we try, and sometimes we try a little like this, and that doesn't work so well, and we try a little like that. But I think as long as we stay focused on the other person and what they need as versus what we want to give, we're already a bit ahead of the game. We're already in a better space because it's an other person's space, and that's what makes it better, and that's what makes it more conducive for peace. Something else to think about in terms of peace is the idea of Mashiach, the redemption. We're told we bring redemption by living redemption, and redemption will be a time of global, universal, and personal peace. Why will there be peace then? Because all evil will be removed, which means in our world we need to see past the evil. We need to see past the barriers. We need to see past what bothers us in the other person. And sometimes you need to think, why am I bothered by them? What is it about them that's triggering me? Sometimes you need to think of all of their beautiful qualities, all the ways they're better than you. And everyone has ways they're better than us. Everyone has advantages. Like, let's say Robin's talking about in her work. Well, maybe in certain ways, her manager has certain strengths she doesn't have, but then obviously Robin has strengths
that's true. That's very true.
So sometimes when we think about that and we focus on that, we can accept them. We can also understand that everyone has junk. And when I understand that, I also have junk, and I also bring junk into relationships. So then I can accept and discard the other person's junk by recognizing that I have junk as well. And if we want to create this world of redemption, this world of Mashiach, I want a world of peace. And a world of peace starts from right here, starts from within me. And sometimes I think, I'm sure many women think this, well, if I'm upset enough, the other person will change. Like, if I really sulk, if I really have a pity party going on, the other person's going to change. And it never works. No one changes because you're upset. Your spouse doesn't change because you're upset. Your children don't change because you're upset. Your colleagues don't change because you're upset. Your friends don't change because you're upset. No one changes because you're upset. So it's far better to just accept their junk than keep on being stuck by being upset over it. Because your being upset isn't going to get them to change anyway. And we all have that fantasy that it will. We all have that fantasy, and it doesn't. It doesn't. So maybe people could think in terms of their own life and their own relationships, like, where does this resonate? Where am I getting stuck by someone else's junk, by someone else's weaknesses, limitations, issues, and thinking if I really get upset at them, they'll change. But guess what? I've been trying for 5 years or for 10 years or for 20 years, and it hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen. Maybe I could revamp and just say, okay, I'm imperfect too. I'm flawed as well. And I'm assuming and hoping the world is going to accept me. And the world's probably going to find out that I'm flawed and I'm imperfect. And the world's still going to accept me and tolerate me and love me and appreciate me. And I need to think of other people that same way. He or she is flawed. So am I. Everyone is. But I want the world to accept me with my flaws notwithstanding. Can I accept the other person and accept theirs? It doesn't mean theirs doesn't exist. It means that theirs aren't going to change by me being upset over it. So it's much healthier in a relationship to accept and move on. Another idea. We're told we're not supposed to judge someone until we're in their place, because their place causes their actions. Now, when we say place, place means a physical place, and place means a spiritual place. Place could mean their socioeconomic situation, where they live, who the people in their world are, what their relationship to God is, what inner and outer challenges they have, their history. Every one of us is a composite of so many factors. So if we can't judge someone until they're in their place, basically, we can never judge anyone, because we're never going to be in the other person's precise place. Judging other people is really like a tricky, sneaky form of allowing the heavenly court to judge us. So it's sort of dangerous. And judging often creates rifts in relationships, meaning it's not only what the other person does, it's how I judge them based on what he or she did or said. So it's really important to remember, I have no clue. And sometimes the other person also has no clue. Did you ever do something irrational and wondered why? Anyone here has ever done something that when they think about it afterwards was absolutely irrational? Like, why in the world did I do that? Yes, me and Becca, anyone else? And Robin,
Yeah.
you raise your virtual hands.
Yeah, that's me.
We do that. We do things and we don't even understand why we're doing it. It doesn't make sense. What was I thinking? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? I don't know. God's plot, previous lifetime stuff, something buried from my childhood. Who knows? Sometimes we are completely irrational. It just makes no sense. So guess what? Sometimes the other person is also completely irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, we just have to tell ourselves, me too. I also can be that way. I can also do things and wonder, what was I thinking and why am I behaving this way and where is this coming from? And of course, because it's me, I don't think it's such bad things. It's just things. But it's true for all of us. And the same way we can accept it and be tolerant in ourselves, we want to look at other people with that same eye. Sometimes they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes it's very subconscious. Sometimes they totally didn't mean it, or they meant it in a totally different way than I absorbed it. And the more we think along these lines, the less we're triggered by other people, and the more we could be amicable with them in our relationship. Another tool that is really an amazing practical tool for negating negative emotions in a relationship and expanding the positive emotions in a relationship. This is the tool of compassion. Compassion for the other person. Compassion could have a lot of different sentences in your brain. Compassion could mean she's doing the best she can with the tools she has. Maybe she doesn't have very good tools. Compassion could mean, my gosh, she lives with herself all day long. If a person is not well, I say a person's mentally not well, this isn't really her. This person's under the influence, just like if someone's under the influence of alcohol or drugs. This person's under the influence of her mental illness, and I don't even know her. And again, when Mashiach comes and all sicknesses are removed, I'll find out what she's really like. But this isn't her. Sometimes for experiences we've had in the past, especially as children with our parents or other people in our world, we can think back to those experiences and release them by really absorbing this message. This person, whoever this person was doing the best they could with the tools they had. And that's it. And then just release all that negativity, all that judgment. They were doing their best. They didn't have very good tools. And it's very important to know that when you're in a space of compassion, you're not hurt by the other person. Because when we're in a space of compassion, we're actually in a movement of giving to the other person. And when we're in that space of giving, we're protected and not being hurt by their energy. So compassion is an amazing tool. It's a practical tool. It's a very vital tool in bringing peace to relations. Now you could say, well, I don't know about this person. I don't know. Let's say like in Robin's example, a business colleague. I don't know her world to have such compassion for her. It looks to me like she's great. Oh, we don't know. We don't know what's going on in someone else's life. But if she's behaving this way, maybe that means that everything is not so great. But just really understanding, and again, or if it was something like Becca's example with her daughters, well, there, of course, she knows their worlds very intimately to a certain degree. So it's very easy for a mother knowing her child's worlds to think of so many reasons to have compassion for them. And that compassion really minimizes any negativity in the relationship and really opens up all the positive. All the positive feelings open up when you have compassion. Has anyone tried this in the past and seen that it worked, or maybe that it didn't work? Try to change the dynamics in a relationship through compassion. Becca?
I did when I worked at the hospital with a certain nurse. She was an older nurse. She had been a military inspector in the past, so she was a little gruff and a little bit grumpy. And I didn't pay any attention to it. I was just always nice, not over nice, but I was nice. And one time she made a little bit of a mistake. And I just covered it and I never said anything. And she was so nice to me after that. She really was respectful.
Appreciated it. Noticed and appreciated it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that all started from that compassion for her. Compassion for her and her situation. You could say, what? This is my superior. But still, you could have compassion for another person, and the other person feels the shift in the relationship, and it really, really makes a difference. So it's so nice to hear that beautiful success story. And I definitely see for myself as well, and see for many people that I've shared this tool with, that it's one of the most practical tools I know. Of course, everything I'm telling you is practical. I believe everything I'm saying. But this one is so powerful in shifting relationships when you really, really get in that space of compassion. Another idea, recognizing that we sometimes have baggage that makes us ultra sensitive. Every one of us has some type of PTSD, and we have to recognize this. We have to recognize in relationships that we're also sometimes part of the issue, and maybe we got hurt in the past by something, and therefore we can be triggered by some relatively light touch. And maybe this happens with certain people and with certain relationships, or this happens more frequently in certain situations. And if you know this is the case, you need to talk yourself through it. Ideally, before the upcoming situation where this could happen, you have to rewrite this in your brain. Sometimes you have to rewrite it in your brain many, many times. Let's say, for example, tomorrow there's going to be a family party, a Memorial Day weekend gathering, and your mother-in-law is going to ask you if you're expecting because you gained weight. And she's going to do that. You know her and you know she's going to do that. She doesn't really mean anything bad, and you're going to get very hurt because you're sensitive about your weight, because you had miscarriages in the past, because you're a private person and these questions bother you. So you want to rewire your brain. You want to understand a lot of this is your junk, is your stuff. Now, you could still view that as a rude question, but you also know she honestly doesn't mean anything bad by it. And you know it's going to happen. So when you think it through, you're really rewiring your brain to not jump, to not overreact, because again, it's partially her and it's partially me. And of course, it takes a certain amount of honesty with yourself to really be able to recognize that, because very often in relationships, we view it as 100% the other person, or about 97% the other person, and maybe 0 to 3% ourselves. But most of the time, that's not true. Sometimes it might be true. And, people might say, no, in this relationship, it's okay. Sometimes. But in most relationships, it's coming from two sides. And it's good to ask yourself, well, what's my side of it? Because it's much easier to change yourself than to change another person. It's very hard to change another person. You might say it's hard to change yourself also, but it's far harder to change the other person. If we think back to Becca's story, she said with her daughter, how her daughter kept coming and complaining about her spouse. So you might not have taken Becca's approach. I don't know if I would have taken Becca's approach, but is Becca able to change her daughter and change the dynamics of how she relates to her husband? Is Becca able to change her daughter's husband? So Becca did what she could do. She changed herself. And that helped. And somehow, with God's help, was a catalyst to improve things. But it's good to ask yourself that. What's my piece in this? Even if my piece is the more minor piece. What's my piece? And for many of us, am I overreacting? Is there a piece of me that feels slighted and overreacts? Is sensitive to criticism and overreacts? Feels not appreciated and overreacts? Not respected and overreacts? Again, you might not overreact in an outward way, but inwardly gets very pulled down by these things that are true and are real, but also are built up, a bit aggrandized, take a bit too much space in our brain. So it's really important because, again, it's much, much simpler to work on yourself. Not that it's simple to work on ourselves, but it's much easier to work on ourselves than to work on anyone else in a relationship. Anyone has done this successfully, has really, in a relationship, worked on changing themselves and seen the results?
So I listen to, and I'm part of like a wife group where that's the whole focus is how to improve your marriage without your husband knowing. Basically, like, so it's a book called The Empowered Wife. And the woman is called Laura Doyle. It's not religious in any particular way, but you could definitely consider it what we'd call old fashioned, right?
Okay.
And it boils down to a lot of like what you're saying, where it's like, worry about yourself. Not to say don't worry about him, but like, don't mother him is a very big thing. Like he's a grown man. You married him for a reason. You love him for a reason. You start, nagging him like his mom, and he's not going to like it, and this is not going to be good for your marriage. And so it's a lot of stuff like that. And and part of it is really nice is like having the group of the women where like we all kind of have studied this approach. And so when we're struggling, it's a really good place to have women to kind of kibitz with,
to and support with. commiserate with
Exactly.
and
Where
get
it's like,
support from.
oh my goodness, I'm so frustrated with this. And also to give you some of that like tough love, like my best friend is in this and got us into it. And there was a time where I was just so frustrated because I thought our marriage was like perfect. And yet I was really struggling with this one area. And apparently I didn't want to admit it. And she really called me out on it, as your best friend can, where she's like, I know that, you know, you don't want to admit that this is a challenge and this is why and whatnot. But I mean, there's been so many marriages in our little group where it's like, you know, it takes a long time. It can take a long time, but where it's like, you know, these they go from hell to heaven, you could say, and it's been awesome to see.
That's beautiful. So you're saying you've seen yourself this idea that as you change, the relationship improved.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And learning and learning to kind of like, you know, work on the stuff that you can work on and then let go of the stuff that you can't.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what we're saying here. That's what I mean by just accepting. Accepting means like, exactly, letting go. You work on what you can and you let go of the other stuff because it just is. And it helps if we just recognize that you also have stuff that probably might be hard to someone, but that's your stuff. You have your stuff. He has his stuff. She has her stuff. You know, we all have stuff. And yes, that's a very, very good way to put it. You work on what you can and you let go the rest. And that's a wonderful mantra in terms of just acceptance. And that goes back to the idea of this world of redemption, world of peace, which starts right here inside ourselves. So Natalie had that. Anyone else has seen that? Okay, I'm back to send a text. Just 1 second. Exactly. So now I have to close my text here, take up a lot of space, but so I'm glad that Natalie already has had this experience of really seeing that it works, that when you change yourself, the other person changes, because sometimes it's hard to buy into that. And of course, they're at fault and they're wrong in whatever the relationship is, with a child, with a neighbor, with a colleague, with a friend, with a spouse, with a parent, with an in-law. In-laws are often bashing grounds. And it's really good to take that responsibility, change yourself, what you can, and let whatever else be. Another idea, another aspect that often comes as a conflict to shalom, to peace, to harmony in a relationship is the idea of miscommunication. Miscommunication happens all the time, in every relationship in our world until the complete redemption. There will always be miscommunication. I remember I was once discussing it with a group of people, and literally within like 3 minutes after I raised this issue, there was this major miscommunication between 2 people in the group, as if I staged it, as if it was a commercial, but it wasn't staged. It was just life. It was just that real. It is that common. So what can we do about miscommunication in relationships? Try to be focused and clear when communicating. Try to be focused when someone's communicating something to you. And in a respectful way, you can ask questions to make sure you understood. Though, of course, sometimes it's hard to tell. A funny story with my secretary. I was once texting her something and I used an abbreviation, IDN. And she asked me in text, what does IDN mean? And I wrote back, I don't know. And she's thinking, if you don't know, what did you use it for? Because IDN means I don't know. So that's just 2 competent, professional adults in a good relationship with each other, and so easy to miscommunicate. Now, there's miscommunication, and then there's something else which I would call non-communication. Of course, non-communication also happens a lot of times in relationships, and especially if we go into family, parents, children, spouses, people can get really hurt that the other person didn't correctly read their mind, that the other person doesn't know what you want. And it's so not fair to be upset with someone for doing or not doing something that you never communicated clearly that you wanted. It's not fair to be upset that he or she is not properly reading your mind. You should say, wow, they should know, he should know, she should know. That's not fair. I imagine if someone was, it was some nice big, I remember, this is true, this is not a joke. I was once by someone's house, a woman I didn't really know, but I was by her, we were talking, and she was talking about how her husband threw her a big surprise party for her, I don't remember what birthday, whatever, 50, 60, whatever the birthday was, or her anniversary, I don't really remember. He threw her this big party and he invited like her 40 closest friends or whatever. And I'm like, I'm really impressed. Your husband knew your 40 closest friends or 30, whoever it was, to invite them to a party. And she's like, oh, I left out a list for him. Like in case he wanted to make a party, I had a list of all my friends and the phone numbers. And of course I laughed. But you know what? She got what she wanted. This is what she wanted, her husband to make her a certain surprise party. And she gave him all the tools and information he would need to make that party that she wanted. Exactly. So we're like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. I would never do that. But she got what she wanted. And she was clear and she communicated. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves in relationships when we're being hurt, am I communicating? Am I reading the other person's communication? So for yourself, be very focused, especially with people that you have a sensitive relationship with. For people that are important in your life, to communicate and to communicate clearly. And when someone is talking to you, try to get them to do the same. No half sentences, no innuendos, to really, really understand what the other person is telling you, because sometimes what they're telling you isn't what they want from you. They're expecting you to read through the blanks. They're expecting you to fill in all the missing sentences. And you can't always do that. And that's not always fair. Another idea, which really brings a lot of peace to relationships, is patience and freely giving favors. If someone asks for something, try to do it and try to do it now. And sometimes it's hard for us because we got our whole list. And even if we want to do it, it's like put somewhere in the later bin, in the when I have time bin. And I really see for myself that when I'm looking at someone else with this eye of, I want to help you. And I want to help you now, like on your time frame, not when it works in my schedule. I see it's very interesting. It really makes me very other focused. And it sort of slows me down. Because instead of this pace of like fast, 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 I've got so much to do, move. What's the next thing on my list? What's the next thing on my agenda? What's the next thing on the schedule for today? I have to slow down. I have to focus on the other person. I'm jumping to help them. And if you make this a goal, if you have this idea of like, I want to help people, I'm in this world to make the world a better place. I'm in this world to make the world a happier place, a kinder place. So I want to do for others. When you think that way, instead of being resentful, when someone asks something from you, you'll be like, oh yes, this is the chance I was waiting for. Here, I want to change the world, and now someone's giving me an opportunity to do so. You can think, I didn't think, picking up her this and bringing her there and that and that. But you know what? It's a wonderful attitude to adopt, to really understand that changing the world comes from all the little changes you make in your own world, and that you really want to make the world a better place. And therefore, any opportunity you have to help someone else is, yes, I want to make the world a better place. And you're giving me an opportunity to do so. You're helping me because this is my goal and you're helping me do it. Does anyone try to adopt this attitude? Has anyone seen results in themselves when they think along these lines?
Yes, I have. I practice it a lot to
And
do
you-
things in the now time when someone has asked me to do it. And every day I do that.
And do you
With-
see how it's changing you?
It's changing me. And when something comes along that maybe I wasn't expecting, and I have to stop and drop and do that because it has to be done now, it also changes my whole entire energy and the whole entire day. And I put the focus on what I'm doing because it must be very important for whatever the situation is. And so I'm very focused and very present in that time.
That's
And
beautiful.
it's amazing how my day turns out days even later, how things just were changed.
That's so beautiful. And I so agree with Robin. And I think when we live with that vision, with that ideal, and someone asks for something, you're happy to do it. Again, you can't always do everything. But if we're giving, like sometimes people feel giving is hard and they feel sort of like they're the punching bag in relationships.
Mhm.
And when a person feels like that, if you feel like you're that punching bag, then you want to ask yourself, am I giving from an unhealthy space? Am I giving from fear, from intimidation, from coercion? Or am I giving with strings attached? Because, giving is a no appreciation business. So to not get hurt, you can't have any strings attached to your giving. And sometimes it's healthy and sometimes it's just too much. And sometimes we snap because we gave, and just physically it was too much. And that's okay too. And we can review our giving and decide where we need to hold back. And maybe the idea is later. Like maybe it's yes, the giving. Let's say someone wanted to come to your house or wanted to come to you for lunch or wanted to go out with you. And maybe it's good, but maybe later. Maybe you have to reschedule when maybe you're not feeling well. So something could be completely healthy and completely good and just not good now. But if you have that general perspective that that's the type of life you want to lead a life where you make the world a better place. You want to lead a life that's other focused. When someone asks, it feels good because this is what you want to do. This is a chance to do it. And and I agree with Robin. It changes the day and it might change days later. Anyone else besides Robin has seen this in their own life?
I have a home care client that leans on me quite a bit, looks to me for even more help than what I'm really supposed to give. And I do offer her that help, but here lately, I felt like that it was getting to be too much. But what I'm trying to do is kind of wean her a little bit off of some of the things that she looks to me for because she trusts me, she doesn't trust anybody else, and all of this. So I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap with her and other people and kind of facilitating connections to other people saying, I can't really help with this, but this person can. They know more, they have more information than I do, so let me kind of help you connect with them.
That's
And
good.
do
And that's
that.
helping. That's helping. Broadening her base of support is helping, giving her boundaries is helping. Helping doesn't always mean saying yes. Sometimes helping is not always saying yes, but sometimes it's saying later. Sometimes it's jumping to it. Sometimes it's explaining why it doesn't work now. But when you have that general perspective, like Robin's talking about, when you have this general perspective of, I want to make the world a better place. I want to add beauty to the world, and I add beauty by being there for others. The opportunities come and we appreciate the opportunities. We're grateful for the opportunities. It's not like resentful, yes, a begrudging, yes, oh, yes. It's like, I'm happy to do it, yes. I want to do this. I appreciate you asking,
Yes.
I want to do this. And
Yeah.
it does change the fabric of everything. But I definitely hear what Becca's saying, and I do feel that that's also a kindness and a giving, is to say, in a healthy relationship, this is how I can help you, and this wouldn't be so good. One other idea, and then maybe we'll hopefully have a little time just to reflect on all of them. Last point is what we started with last time, but ego. So often there's ego interwoven in all of our relationships. She said this to me. She's treating me like this. This child is not listening to me. She's talking to me so impudently. If we can remove that ego, there's so much less hurt. There's so much less friction. In other words, like if we take that exaggerated me out of the sentence, what's left in the storyline? Take the child example. She's not listening to me. If I remove that me, what's left in the story? She's not listening. Okay. It doesn't hurt so much. It's fairly normal. That's an issue I can help her fix. Personal affront. So when we're in a relationship and there's friction in a relationship, and of course it's hard sometimes to be honest, and that's why sometimes it's good to have a good friend that can really help you see more clearly, because sometimes it's hard to see it ourselves. But if I take my ego out of the relationship, it really changes things. Even in a situation where you think the other person's completely the one at fault. I had an interesting situation myself once where I felt I was completely the victim. I had a very dysfunctional babysitter who would come very late, especially on Sundays. And every Sunday was the same story, the bus schedule and this, it's Sunday, but you walk into my house an hour late, I'm an hour late for work. Like, you got to figure out by now the bus schedule on Sunday. And at a certain point, a few months into the relationship, I was like, where's my piece now? Like, what do you mean my piece? She's being dysfunctional. She's showing up late. I'm the one suffering. I mean, what do you mean my piece? What am I doing wrong? I'm the victim. I'm like, okay, fine. Now we got through that story. Now let's get to the facts. Where's your piece? Where's your ego in this? And there's an ego there. Ego is, she's doing this to me. Just take out that to me piece of it. She's doing this to me. What do I have left? What's left on the plate when I take away the to me? She's actually dysfunctional. And then she's not figuring out the Sunday bus schedules. And I have this sneaky suspicion the entire year is going to go by and she's not going to figure them out. And that's just her. And once I took my ego out of the situation, it's very interesting, but it really shifted. No, she did not start coming on time. No fairy tale ending to the story. She still came very late every Sunday. But I don't know, it just didn't bother me the same way. I wasn't stressed. I accepted it. She's going to come late, and that's the reality. And let me make alternative arrangements, and no point in getting upset. Like we said before, getting upset didn't change her. The ego didn't change her. My frustration didn't change her. None of it helped. So just take away the ego, accept the reality, and it lessened a lot of the negative feelings. It didn't change the facts, but it changed my dealing with the facts. It definitely changed the dynamics of the relationship. So even in a situation where you're the victim, so to speak, what are you doing wrong? There still could be ego involved. And that ego still could add to the negativity and the stress and the friction in a relationship. Of course, if you're dealing with people that are challenging sometimes to deal with, you want to think about these people in terms of this as well. Important people in your life, or people that are significant for various reasons, that have sensitive egos. And if that's the case, you want to walk delicately around them, because you understand that how another person might process, they could process it very differently because of their sensitivity in this area. And that's how, therefore, they're going to be reacting differently. And then you're going to react, and then they're going to react. And this brings negativity in a relationship. We don't want there to be negativity, because we don't want negativity in any of our relationships. So what I'd like to do now, I know I went quickly through a lot of ideas, but they're all real. They're all meaningful. They all work. They're all practical. They're all meant to be practically applied. So I'm just going to zoom through them quickly, just sort of give you the whole smorgasbord. And I'd like you to really think from all these ideas of the ones you can put in your toolbox. Now, maybe like Natalie said she was already doing this, and Becca said she was doing that, and Robin said she was doing that. That's great. You can reinforce things that are already in the toolbox. Those might be the ones that resonate the most. But try to think through, what here can I really take home with me? What here do I really want to work on in all my relationships, or in a very specific challenge relationship? This might be how I want to rework all my relationships, or just with that person or those people that currently is something I know is not going well. So the first thing we spoke about was the idea of sometimes the negativity is taking up space, and another person taking up space lessens your space. So is your space making another person feel they have less space? Or is another person making you feel you have less space? That was the first idea. The second idea we spoke about at length was appreciation for the things you might not think you need, or you might not think you want, or that happen all the time. But appreciation to really add peace, harmony, sweetness to a relationship. And we spoke about valuing the ideal of peace, understanding the value of peace, understanding how much God wants peace, and therefore sacrificing for peace. Those were the three things we discussed last week. This week, we spoke about the two ideas from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, understanding how hugely important every person is. Every person is a diamond, treating them as such. And when you want to add peace, thinking about not what you want to give, but what the other person needs to receive. Thinking about redemption, Mashiach. Understanding that's universal peace, and universal peace starts with me. And I can add that peace by focusing on the good in the other person. Accept they're good, accept how they're good, how they can be better than yours. And like Natalie said, work on what you can and let go of the rest, discard the rest. It's not going to change anyway, so there's no gain in keep butting your head with it. Don't feel if you're getting upset, they're going to change. You're getting upset never changes anyone. That's a really hard thing for some of us to internalize. My getting upset does not change, not my spouse, not my mother, not my mother-in-law, not my child, not my colleague, not my boss, not my employee. Getting upset doesn't change anyone. We spoke about the idea of not judging people until you're in their place, and you're never in their place. You have no clue. Compassion, doing the best he or she can with the tools he has. All the different lines you can say for compassion. Compassion lessens the negativity and releases the love. Understanding my own baggage that makes me ultra sensitive, and reworking things in my mind, changing the wiring in my mind, especially over things that I know are coming up and I know are going to be triggers, to go through them gracefully, harmoniously, and without getting triggered. Always remembering it's easier to change yourself than the other person. Miscommunications and non-communications. Am I communicating? Am I communicating clearly? Do I still have this childlike fantasy that the other person should know what I want without me saying it, and then get upset when they don't? So communication and clear communication, and asking and prompting other people to communicate, and to communicate clearly, and for you to understand their communication. Patience and freely giving favors, and appreciating giving favors, and having a mindset that you want to do favors, you want to create a beautiful world, and you know this is how you start. And looking at the ego in your own relationships, finding your own and trying to remove it from the relationship, and seeing that when you remove the ego, things shift. Even when you're the victim, things shift. That was a fast overview. If you can take one thing from that list, ideally more, 2 or 3 would be nice, 4 would be awesome, but at least one. Raise your virtual or physical hand. Think of one thing you're going to commit to from this list. One, or ideally more. Okay, I see. Almost everyone's physical or virtual hand is up. 1 or more. One or more that you can commit to. Okay. I have at least one that I'm going to commit to. I know it will make a difference. This is a beautiful, oh, everyone, we got this unanimous. Every single person here at least committed to one thing. Wow, this class is bringing peace to themselves, peace to their relationships, and peace to the world.